we're going to go to West Virginia. I think it's fascinating when we find ancient writings in America. And these I'm going to date somewhere between 7 and 900 AD. They are Celtic writings. They are from the Celts of Europe. And, you know, water was the freeway of those generations. Water usually provided transportation, that is to say, means of the roadway for transportation. Water provided fish for food, as well as game must always come to water along rivers and so forth. And man must have water to live. So needless to say, man got along quite well on the waterways, including the ocean. But in West Virginia, and we're only, many of you will remember the Wyoming petroglyph, where a priest had written a winter solstice a petroglyph describing the birth of Christ. Well, we're going to be approximately 2 to 3 miles as the crow flies, we'll say, from that spot. So I have no doubt in my mind that it is the same priest that wrote this particular petroglyph in rebus. It is his style, and as you know, you can always kind of tell by a man's style. And it would seem that he had discovered quite a find here in this particular area. But how good West Virginia is, such a beautiful state with sufficient water, and yet not that far away from some major waterways, whether it be the Atlantic or rivers leading there too. A lot of rivers in this particular area, and much wildlife. Thus, quite a population, even at this time, 7 to 800 AD, as you will determine in the documentary. So, with that having been said, we thank Robert Pyle and his wonderful family and all the people of West Virginia that assisted us in this. Hospitality, how fantastic when people make you feel so welcome. It sure makes you always want to go back again, and I'm sure we will see them again and get deeper into some of the things, artifacts, petroglyphs that they have found there. So, get set. Here we go, West Virginia. Ladies and gentlemen, again in West Virginia. We're in the county of Wyoming. And again, somebody that needs no introduction, Robert Pyle. Robert, it's so good to be back with you. And you have a guest today that we're anxious to meet.
Yes.
Introduce him to us, won't you?
Yes, sir, I sure will. Mr. John Grant from Grantsville, Maryland.
Hi, Bob.
John.
How are you? Good to see you.
Fine. Good seeing you, too.
Right.
Yes. John has been quite involved in petroglyph research, not only in North America, but in Europe, in Ireland, Scotland, and several other areas, I'm sure.
Yes.
But I'd contacted his brother Bill, who lives in Scotland, and is a Celtic linguist. And John had studied Celtic languages under the late Dr. Robert Myers from the Catholic Diocese in Washington, D.C., and had the pleasure of having Bill and Dr. Myers and John at the Wyoming County Petroglyph. So it's only fitting that he's here with this one, and the one that Ray and Kathy Dameron's. So we're really interested in knowing what you have to say about this one, and as well as Dr. Murray too. So
okay, now
this is it.
Bob, I as I told you earlier, I'm sort of filled up because I can recall when we were down here in 1983 with Dr. Meyer. Dr. Meyer at that time said, if you can find something that will compare to this either here or abroad, it'll be one of the greatest finds as far as Celtic literature is known, as for the find of the Dead Sea Scrolls in Palestine. And so it is that you found that the Dingus petroglyphs, they were similar, but not exactly. And this is so close to what we had over at the other site near Oceana that I'm just amazed by it. I'm also interested to see that there are several new symbols that I can identify, and then one that is sort of unknown to me. Can I point them out to you,
Oh,
Bob?
sure. Yeah, I would like for you to do that.
Up here, Bob, is a delta sign, and yes, I'll use this stick to point it. This delta sign, it has several connotations to it. It can either be like a Hebrew delta, which would be symbolized door in one way or the other.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is that I found a symbol just exactly like that, with the exception of the fact that it only had one dash here instead of two on a stone in Ireland. It's called a portrait stone. And that sort of surprised me to see that. And it is one of the very things that has a tie to other petroglyphs in foreign countries. This symbol over here that looks like a lambeth of some kind, some form of lambeth, is different. That hasn't appeared on any of the other petroglyphs we've had so far. I have a hunch, perhaps, that somewhere along the line, this may have a zodiacal tendency to talk about the season,
Sure.
or perhaps the position of the sun or the moon, something like that. Because when this was talked about in the portraits petroglyph, it had to do with the sun. As I say, this one I'm not too sure.
Right.
Now, there are two other things over here that Bob, that you and I both are find tremendous. This we have, and it's called a rebus. And can the camera pick this up?
Yeah.
All right. It's called a rebus. And this would be, of course, be the mast. And Bob, you say you found a second one like this?
Yes, and it's just less than a mile from this site, and it's really unique because of the fact that we in archaeology look for repeats at petroglyph sites. Those symbols indicate that have been repeated, communication, meaningful symbolism.
Now, one of the other things I found repeated on some of the other sites is this thing looks like a little X. That's the IA symbol that is used in Ogham. And of course, when we talk about Ogham, we're talking about these lines here. And of course, we want to remember that these are all abstract symbols. They're not pictures. They're abstract symbols, meaning words. Once again, we have the thing that looks like a lambeth picking up here. And this is one that, Bob, you always told me, don't let your finger lead your brain. And so I'm holding back on this, but it certainly resembles a Hebrew, the Hebrew Asashah. And of course, then we have the symbol up here that appears on the others, and it could be a form of a cross.
Sure.
Bob, I've been doing a lot of talking.
Oh, that's fine, because I'm not a linguist. I'm an archaeologist,
okay,
and so I try to make sure that what I have chalked out has been accurately done, and all that the marks are of the same time period. And again, that I just try to make sure that the archaeology is done as correctly as possible, and I depend on the linguists such as yourself and Dr. Myers, and unfortunately that that
Dr.
he's not with us now, but maybe he is with us. Dr. Fell, I just
yeah, that's right. Dr. Fell is gone too. One of the things that intrigues me is this. Is that a form of Cairo, Christ our Savior?
Yes.
And it will be interesting. Once again, we don't let our brain lead our finger, but that's intriguing there.
Yes, well, the other symbol that I refer to as a boat rebus as well is a very important discovery, and we'll be visiting that site today also.
Okay, fine.
So we'll pick up on that at a later date.
One other thing I'd like to point out that appears in a lot of these petroglyphs, it looks like an arrow. Actually, it's one of the Ogham symbols sort of run together. But it looks like an arrow. You have one here. You have one that appears in here somewhere. Here is one here. And
as Dr. Murray and you had indicated, this being the stem line and these being the marks above that.
Part of the mark.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we have these small
Tifnik or not,
flag, perhaps. It's
okay. There I am dwelling in this area I'm not supposed to.
Right.
Okay.
But apparently, who did this must have had a very close tie to the person who did the other one over near Oceania, because the symbols resemble each other very much.
Hmm. I believe the Cairo especially.
Yes, yes. So,
That's
would you like
great.
to add something to this?
Yeah.
I would like, if you could, only if you wish, but it would be so appropriate if you could just mention the song in Ireland about St. Patrick. Let him have enough room to give us.
Okay, fine.
Yeah.
All right, and if you would just draw attention back to the
All right.
Cairo and share that with us.
One of the songs that so many of the Irish monks seem to use, and is still used in Ireland, and it has to do with the ship, and it's sort of the idea of perhaps Jesus is my pilot, because when St. Patrick first came to Ireland, they asked him, about his faith and what he was, and St. Patrick had a song, a poem that he put to song, which translated goes, Christ before me, Christ behind me, Christ with friend and Christ in danger. And it's a very lilting tune, as so many Irish tunes are. And so perhaps with this boat Rebus, and the fact that there might be a Cairo there, it leads to all kind of speculation that it might be that this man was saying, Jesus our Lord is my pilot. So there we are, sir.
Yeah, I think it was in the 5th century AD that the hermit-type priests were leaving Ireland, and because of temptation and unrest within the country, and they said that we'll set our sails and the Lord will blow us to where He wants us to be. And then you look at, here it is, a boat Rebus, and these are the only ones. This one and the other site are the only 2 boat Rebuses that I know of in West Virginia.
Yes. That's an interesting point, and this gets into the legend of St. Brendan, who, as you said, the Irish monks would set sail from Ireland without a rudder, just the sail up. The idea that the Lord would take them where He wanted them to go with the wind. And it's an interesting thing, because when you get into the Viking runes and translate some of these runes, you find out the Vikings are saying, because they got to Iceland and they got to Greenland, and some of the islands as you come across the North Atlantic, they will always say the anchorites were here before us. And this was a common term given to these Irish monks who wanted to live alone. They were called anchorites, and it's a very old term that comes from the eastern part of the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Okay.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
Is that all right?
That was beautiful.
Okay.
Great.
Fine.
Yeah, it is a really important discovery, both of the sites, I think.
Robert, do you have anything else you'd like to say about it?
I hope that we can continue doing research.
Oh, we can tell you, over when we're in the ground is when we'll stop.
I know that.
And then someone else will take our place.
Yeah.
Do you think there's any possibility that this could be a sunburst here?
Yes, I saw that.
Yeah.
There is some damage here, probably from something falling above.
Yes.
But I believe this was more of a sunburst here.
What I think is an unchalked symbol that is right. We looked at that just right above your finger.
Yeah, there is like a square area there.
And it looks very much like the other one, which is the photograph you have of the one down the way.
We had conducted some light shadows here with the flashlight lighting at that early time that we were here, and you can see some distinct markings, but again, one doesn't want to really hurriedly mark these out. Exactly. So, I mean, I was very tempted to do so, but I just feel that when there is a question, then we'll mark those in charcoal. But again, even then, I would rather have scholars like yourselves and to look at them, and then you tell me, and then I'll look at it and look at the weather pattern. I'll look at the association with all the other symbols as to see if this is of pretty much the same time period. I look at the manganese patina that's over the entire surface area, something that's recent like this one right here. This is very identifiable being recent. I didn't chalk this out, but you can see where it has been damaged, possibly due from a bullet, probably 22 or something like that. So unfortunately, that's the situation with some of the petroglyphs, that they're quite vulnerable to the public. But
These ships, those stands out. This is absolute.
Yeah.
That's,
Yeah.
well, it will be interesting to do more research, continued research on this,
Yeah.
because there's a message here, I'm sure. That,
I think so.
Oh,
This was one of the areas that really fascinated me. Was this area here has been very purposely rubbed, and it's very indented, and it's similar to the situation at the Dingus site, and then the large groove and coned out area there. Yeah, that's been purposely done as well. And as to how it's associated with, or if in fact any association, is just something that will have to be looked into. But
if this should be a sunburst, it might possibly have something to do with an alignment.
okay,
Just possibly. It might be a mark
the
for
property
alignment.
owner had mentioned that the sun does shine in here, and there is a good possibility that may be another winter solstice astronomical alignment. So these are things that'll have to be, checked.
Did I
Or
tell you
should
what
be.
I tried to work out with Bob up at the Oceana petroglyph? I went up there then in the summertime. I checked with the Naval Observatory about the azimuth of the sun, and if it came through the same notch in the hill, you see the opposite of the summer solstice is St. John the Baptist. And I wondered if perhaps St. John's, there might be a grotto to St. John's also, as well as to the one to our Lord up there at Oceana. Yeah, I couldn't really find anything, but then I didn't do that much tramping around. As I say, I was worried about snakes and so forth, and I only had a few hours, but I found a little hillside where it might be possible that it would be.
Yeah. Well, that's just part of everything, is that not leaving anything uncovered and trying to explore and test every idea that one has. So.
I would like to say to the young people, you can see this bullet hole where somebody probably has thought, well, does my old 22 work all right? I want to say something to the young people.
Yeah.
And especially when I have one of my countrymen here with me. The Irish believe in preserving things. We had to. But
Yeah.
this is heritage. And when you come across something like this, call attention to an archaeological department, to a local university, or to one of the epigraphic societies, or even the Irish embassy itself. When you see markings similar to this, don't destroy them. Don't add to them with your initials or names. There are many bare rocks in this nation that can still afford room for your name, but not near one of these ancient petroglyphs. They are our historical heritage, and so very important. And we seem to have a people that migrated through this general area, a priest because he thinks as a priest, most likely, but protect them and help preserve them. Again, as I state, it's far more rewarding to maintain our heritage than to destroy it. Think in those terms. So, there you are, a fantastic work. And thank you for being here with us.
Yeah.
See, it's like here in southern West Virginia, it was documented in the 1700s of 11 prehistoric stone dams that were 100 foot high, that had 1 foot by 18-inch square or shaped stones that made up the dams. And there was also, it was documented that there was a mound positioned on the top of one of these dams, these real prehistoric dams. And one of them was up at Clear Fork area here, which is only about 12, 14 miles maybe, but I had looked at some of the possibilities geologically, and there is one area there, and the Corps of Engineers, when they were testing to put in a power plant, they found that there was 100 foot of alluvium within that area, in that valley area, and there's ideal situation there, topography-wise, to have blocked that up and created a lake. We're located in Wyoming County, West Virginia again, and it's just a mile from the other site that we just left from. This is Ray and Kathy Dameron of Wyoming County, and this is their discovery. This is another petroglyph, and again, it's very similar to the other site that we looked at that had a boat rebus. And me just being an archaeologist and not a linguist, I still think that it's most likely a boat rebus. And it's been, what, about 12 years ago, isn't that right, Ray?
82.
82, okay, yeah. And back in 1982, and Kathy and Ray, they came down here, and their two of their boys, and excavated a large proportion of this rock shelter. And in doing so, had encountered a human skeleton. It's trying to be recovered again so that it can be studied and documented and then re-entombed. And the many bone artifacts that have been found here are very special and very well crafted. And I guess if these early Native Americans were in contact with any of the scribes or any of the missionaries, the priests that came through this area, that's what I would expect to see in the artifact record, are very well shaped and a variety of quality tools.
From the area that most likely these people would have come from, I find the rub spots interesting because that makes it a cup, possibly. And of course, cups always had to do with mining. So were they mining some? There were no rings, but it's something that at least can be taken into consideration.
Sure.
Plus we have M's as well, or the Christian sign would be pi, and we know what that means. There is also overall a delete, like we had at the other crossing, with a chi as well. So it needs study, certainly.
Okay, we've translated the panel that you're going to be shown. I think you'll enjoy it. It is amazing that men's language still, we derive the same concerns and warnings and so forth. A message has always been a sign or to deliver a message. So with that having been said, let's determine what was this man like that chiseled this particular petroglyph and rebus. Well, it's obvious he was a priest or a man that loved the Lord, and you'll see why. Let's go to the translation, and you can picture the man. Now, this is basically the overall panel, and here I show you the strokes and the letters that they stand for. You will notice in the lower left corner of the screen, you will see a ship rebus. In other words, a boat with a sail and people inside the boat, which is rather fascinating, but also it translates and has a very specific meaning. You will note also that the top line, which would be at the top left, gives you a start, in other words, an introduction. And then down where I have the word written start, you will notice a caret. Well, that's actually part of the chiseling. That means start here. And I will call those to your attention as we go through the petroglyph. Let's take the rebus first of the ship, and we'll translate it from the Gaelic into our present day English. Note the Cairo is Greek, and we noted that this priest used this at the Wyoming petroglyph as well. And note also that the Cairo was part of the sail. And what does it say? It is Christ. And then the BM is B-E-I-M. BIM is smitten. All right, we have that in the fore part of the sail portion. And then down in the ship itself, the individuals create the letters T, C-H-A. Of course, this is a vowelless ogham. They must be added. And then you will note C-O-M-A, at the end. And what do you have? You have Christ was smitten as an abundant, I'll read down. Yes, Christ was smitten and paid an abundant ransom for those who allow him to be the wind or the spirit that drives their ship. And in the rebus, you will notice that the Chi-Rho is up pushing the sail. There are records, and it would seem that our Irish friend that was with us mentioned this, but I think it's worth mentioning again, that there were certain priests that actually would not use a rudder, that simply set sail and prayed and let the Father push the vessel. So we see a proof here in ancient writings in America, in West Virginia, of this one priest that drifted to this particular place. I find it fascinating that God himself stated to the priest that he would scatter them with the people. And we found priests in more places than one. Bat Creek Stone, apparently there were 9 priests there that were buried, and an ancient Hebrew writing there concerning those particular priests. And now let's get on with the translation. Allowing God to drive the sail, we go up to the start, OB, and then GM, and then we have a BH, and then BL. We add the vowels OB. Ob is a river. And GM, of course, is Ogum, and he's identifying the alphabet that he is using. And Bish is like bees, the state of affairs. And it translates, by this river, and I cut this Ogum message, they are thick as bees, that is the state of affairs. Now it was strange because I did not see a river at this place, and I called a gentleman, I will not say who, and I said, I don't quite understand this, because it states that it's by a river. And I don't remember seeing the river, and he stated, well, that was changed. The course of the river was changed, that this particular stone was actually part of the river bank. So we have this man, this priest, saying, I am by this river, I cut this message in stone, they're like bees around us. That is the state of affairs. It is rare to find the actual word Ogum, which is a Gaelic word as well as an alphabet, and I felt real fortunate to actually find it utilized to explain the message and the method that was utilized by the priest to convey the message. I really like that. I do. Okay, back to the translation on the start. You notice I have the word start, and there is a caret there on the particular drawing where it says start, and I don't see it at this moment, but I'll call it to your attention. We will have a Chi Alpha just below that word start in the drawing, and I'll picture it better for you. And what Chi Alpha? Well, there you have it. It is titled Chi-Rho, and it's actually Chi Alpha, which the caret meaning this is the start. The priest could not help writing at the same time, Christ is always the beginning. All right, Alpha being the beginning and the Chi being Christ. Okay, now on into the translation. They stipulate on the wall that I am, came, am, eb, ed, I, ma, and G, which being translated, and I see that we have Christ is always the beginning there by the caret, if you can see that, okay? And what it means, we went around a large number on the other side. We evaded a large number by going on the outside. That's what the line reads from the caret there. Now, if we can pull the arrow, up to the road, the BLT. Let's take it over to the BLT. That forms a word by itself, which you see there by the arrow, the place where many roads come together, BLT. Now, we notice that there is a long road there, the BLT meaning a place where many roads meet. Notice basically a map of the area. Let's take the arrow right up the road there where two crossings are, and we see some forks where valleys and various rivers or things come together. And I'm not going to describe it too much, or it would give the location basically from this map of where all these things were. So it was a place. And I called the man back after the full translation, and I said, it would seem this was quite a metropolis at one time. So he said, why do you say that? Because actually it was. And then explaining to him that he had mentioned about going around, and with the subject being the river, gone around on the other side of the river, they had passed a large encampment. And let's get back to the translation then, and we'll see another message that he gave us. The back of the boat, right at the back of the ship, we begin to read, Boga Boga Mal. And it says, bows. And this word Boga means weapons, all right? Weapons, bows as weapons, not certainly bows on a package. Mal is thousands in Gaelic. And double M, is all around you on every side. So we see then the little cross. I don't know if we can bring the arrow in where that little cross is there by the L. Can you do that? Right down over there. End of message. So basically, beginning with the carrot and ending with that little cross. How fascinating this particular pictograph with a rebus by this priest. He was happy. He came there for converts, and he found lots of them. If we can, I would like to have the picture back again to show you that there's more rebuses than one in this. You remember the bows? Well, when you notice the letters, the G and the B, that's drawn like a bow in the actual translation. You will notice that the BG, and then see the G's. G is two long strokes across the stem line, and it's like a bent bow, like it's drawn. So in a sense, we have a rebus there, and it is beautiful when we see messages left from long ago. There's a great deal more work to be done on this translation, but this is the main message. Christ in our sails drives our ship. Christ in our sails brought us here. And there's thousands of them to convert and work with. But bows, thousands of them, and they're all around us. This is really an intersection. This is a place where many roads come together. And historically, there it is said, and I wish Robert Powell could relate this story, but that's not going to be possible for this particular documentary. But he related that up on one ridge, which would be just behind this petroglyph, the Indian population reported that there were Celts, well, they didn't use that terminology, whites, I'll put it that way, that lived on a ridge by there, and they were very feared. That is to say, feared as far as attacking them. But evidently they coexisted for quite some time here. Travels in America. Many might say, well, what does this have to do with God's Word? Everything. It documents that God's Word is true. That, yes, Christ is the beginning. Yes, if Christ drives your sail, in other words, if Christ is the captain of your life, you're very blessed. And As you can see, this man was not disturbed too much that there were thousands around him. We know where he felt his protection came from, utilizing common sense and yet diplomacy, and the ambassador of all ambassadors to help him get along with people, the Holy Spirit. Very familiar with it. I felt very pleased and impressed that this man allowed Christ to be at the top of his mast, but also at the top of his very letter. That, yes, the message begins here, but Chi Alpha, Christ is always the beginning. That's where it always begins. What a beautiful, wonderful message, chiseled in West Virginia. I hope you enjoyed it. 30 years he has spent, and in the last 5 years he has put into documenting much of the work that he has done. He has written a book titled All That Remains, which I think is so appropriate. A West Virginia archaeologist discoveries. And of course, that West Virginian is none other than Robert Pyle, who has been so gracious to spend this time with us. You know, much of the work, and what I find about this is so good, it's not just your typical book of saying this documents this fact and that's it. Mr. Pyle is a teacher, and it does not only document the fact, he teaches you and leads you through certain finds, how they came to pass, where he found them, and it's all documented with picture, and one picture says 1,000 words, and I forget how many pictures there are in this, but it's a lot of them, and we're going to have them available here at the chapel. I know you're going to enjoy All That Remains. All That Remains, and all you have to do is contact the chapel. We'll have them in hand, and feel free to write Mr. Pyle if you like after you receive the copy, and congratulate him on what a great job he has done. You know, dedication to a purpose, to document that all that remains should also be taken care of. So when you're out in whatever state and you find one of these ancient remains, protect it, take care of it. I know this is going to be educational to you, and I know that you would enjoy receiving a copy. Again, All That Remains, and how precious it is that we have people with dedication to protect that does remain. Thank you. It's been a pleasure having you with us through this hour with Robert Pyle. It's always a thrill finding Ogham about this nation. We're going to go to New Mexico, across the country, practically from the first Ogham mentioned. And we're going to go to that great state of New Mexico, up away from the Rio Grande, not all that far, but certainly not on it. And we find some Ogham where a group of people evidently had spent some time. It was a place of worship. I think you'll enjoy it. And we'll translate and give you the translation. Strange thing, you're going to find that they had created something hundreds of years before, and there were mortars that were very deep there, that's where you grind corn. And yet it's a desert-like. And then we see why, and we can explain why corn was growing there quite openly. Not only change of weather, but because of man's help. Okay, let's go to it if we may. Okay, folks, we're guest of Gene Ballinger again, out of whose residence in Hatch, New Mexico, as the Courier newspaper, as well as an organization I wanted to talk to you a minute about. Gene, thanks for having us as guest again. It's a pleasure being here with you.
Thank you.
And we'll ask you to explain this petroglyph here to us, if you would.
All right, sir. These are our Membri Indians who came into this part of the country about 950, and left about 1100 AD. These are pecked with other stones, but they are petroglyphs. And you can see this is the circle, basically circle of life. But the footprints that you see are varied sizes, which we assume to be male and female and child. And the footprints come up, follow across this boulder, onto the next boulder, and follow directly up to there are caves above us. And these go directly there. Although they're pecked in the ground, they give a message. And behind us are the remains of two memory pit houses, which directly associate to this. Above us, we have more memory and some that may not be, we don't know. But each one of the petroglyphs has a direct and distinct meaning, and these people were very religious in nature. Unfortunately, there's a great deal not known about them. This is one of our pet projects with Dr. Murray, and finding these locations and preserving them are of utmost importance to us. All right, the footprints continue from the bottom and come up and follow through to what appears to be an X, which in reality is not, and go strictly and directly on to the caves. Associated with these is a seated figure of some type. These figures, which appear to be swirls going to a head, our best knowledge of this indicates that this is infinity, that man grows, dies, and grows again. There is some graffiti here, we'll forget that. This symbol is the same thing done by a different party. And these people were very religious, and their maker, their god, was symbolized in the way that they saw him, very much as they do today. This symbol is the best that we can determine the symbol of the God himself as they see him. But these were not done by the same, they were done by the same people, but not done by the same persons. And we find that when you begin to understand the messages that they were relaying, that they were very explicit in what they say, whether they are directing you to a water site or to another village, or in this case to caves. They were leaving these messages for other people. We are now above the petroglyphs, headed up toward the caves, and this particular canyon was known for the number of massacres by the Apaches between about 1849 and 1880. At the other end of the pass is an old cavalry fort. This trail was used by a stage company from 1859 on to the 1880s. This is a grave site of one of some 500 immigrants who passed through here that were killed by the Apaches. This was Apache land, and they were incursioning on these people, the Apaches, and they were not appreciated. The bones that were left in this canyon in 1851 to 1861 were gathered up by U.S. cavalry, and at that time they counted 500. We're up at the top almost of the ridge now, below the petroglyphs as they walk up and they come toward these caves. And one is hard to see. This entrance isn't too bad. There are 2 or 3 more along this ridge. We do not know if these caves were used for protection or if they were used for comfort or religious purposes. We do not know. But we do know that the time period is about right. And perhaps used by very ancient man because of the smoke black. In modern times, this particular cave has its own history. In Deming, which is many miles from here, there was a robbery back in the 1880s, and the robbers were eventually caught. But the loot was never found anywhere, until recent years, perhaps the last 15, just happened to be a bag, a leather bag, found in this vicinity, probably this cave, that came from that robbery. We understand that it probably contained a gold coin, and very little is known about who may have found it, but rumor is that he hasn't worked much since. So you never know what happens in this old country of ours.
David? Yeah, do you want the top hot?
Oh, Doc, you do have some Ogham-like stuff in here.
It's been incised,
Yeah.
rubbed.
Yep, they are not the same. These are to here. This one comes to here. These go down here. I'll be able to read that.
I'm just leaning against this one.
I didn't bring a chair or anything.
323.
And now we go to the Ogham in New Mexico. There we have it, and we'll give you a little help there. How beautiful to find in this particular place LGHMBBLBN. What does all this mean? Well, let's go for a translation and see what we can find. And you find the very Celt writing. ELG is always is an ancient name for Ireland. H is the thorn bush or tree. IMBE is a weir in ancient Saxon, or dam, what we would call in modern day English a dam. In BE is, we're going to homestead this, or farmstead if you like, and BAN, fair, blessed. So this is what they said. We Celts have built this thorn-shaped weir or dam. We homestead it and ask fair blessings. So these as well were worshipers, no doubt, of our Heavenly Father. The thorn shape, well, you know what is ironic is that the CCCs, that was a group of a work detail formed before World War II, after the Depression, for young men, whereby they could work for the government, and they did many things. Well, they built a dam here in basically the same spot area. And with the mortars that were so deep, we were able to see that there was water in the area, and both the American Indian and the Celts lived in this particular place. Now let's go to another impression here. And here we see at the opening of a cave in this same general area, there we have it, FLF in Ogham. And what does FLF mean in Ogham? Well, let's see if we can work out a translation. And it is full, which is shelter, and F with the vowel O is good. And what does it mean? Well, we're standing in the mouth of a cave, and there are other caves around, so shelter is good here. And that meant year-round, apparently, and so fascinating. In the mouth of this same cave, there was a sort of a solstice, and evidently the winter solstice, and you'll see why. Let's go right to that solstice, if we may. You can see the sun drawing there. Let's help it a little bit, if we may, and we will show you the rays of the sun, whereby you have your Ogham strokes, S. And what does SS mean? Okay, SIS is down or under or northward. And what it means when the sun aligns with something in this area, and someone will have to go there on the winter solstice, sun is northmost, sun in, or is in its most northmost position, rather, okay? Fascinating. Right in the mouth of the same cave. This place also had been inhabited by the American Indian for many, many years, probably far longer than the Celts, because it was a place of worship. It was a very sacred place, I feel, for both parties, but especially the American Indian. There were many crosses of the American Indian style, the ancient ones, I will call them, and which meant to their father, which is a earth sign from all directions, this type cross. And it was fascinating to see the worship that had taken place on this place as inhabited by the American Indian. Let's see if we have an American Indian one coming up now. Yes, there we have it. You see the footprint, which appears to be a triangle up above what I'm going to describe here, and that means travel. These footprints started down at the very bottom of this mountain and worked their way up. Now, if I can have the arrow, if I could, it would be very helpful to me. Move the arrow down below that line right there. There you go, right to that. That is a cross. Now, it definitely is. It is shaped as a Hebrew tet. But what this means is this cross, a circle with a cross in it, in Indian Sign Language, usually one of this nature, if there is a dot in each of the four quadrants of that circle with of the cross being in it, it means we divided things equally. And in dividing things equally, we see that the larger part of the tribe went south, and pull the arrow back to your left just a little bit. Right there. Now, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of the major part went south after things were divided. You will notice then on the other side of the circle, we'll move our little arrow right over on the other side, and you notice that on the far left there of your screen, there were 4 parts that went in a direction by themselves after things were divided. And then a group of 5, 2 above may have split from 3, and they went basically in that same general direction also. But here you have a tribe leaving a particular area for some specific reason, and it gives you the directions in which they left there for further tribe members or fellows to know which way they went in their travels. How interesting when all of our peoples left messages. There's nothing new under the sun. Today we have faxes and people leave a lot of messages. Quite frankly, I don't think they're as beautiful as the messages of old. I'm not sure they're as meaningful. when we see that man survived with God's help and how they praised him regardless of who they were. Interesting, you bet.
In relation to such sites as these, which must be protected, it's one thing to read about them and see photographs, even television. It's another to see the real thing. And toward that end, a few of us have gotten together, including some archaeologists and others, and we have a program called Southwestern Ventures, wherein we take interested people to these various sites on a weekly basis so they can see firsthand what they are, what they look like, their age, and why they must be preserved. And we'd be happy to hear from you if you might be interested in going on a trip with us sometime. It's a non-for-profit program, not expensive, and if you would drop us a line at Ventures at P.O. Box 813, Hatch, New Mexico 87937, we'll be happy to send you the information. You might well enjoy our Southwest.